Greetings, Internet, and welcome to Top 12. Why Top 12? Well, I know a lot of people do either Top 5 or Top 10, and actually one channel even does Top 11, but I figured why not take it just that extra step? Besides, this eliminates the need for honorable mention. You want to know what's honorable mention? Numbers 12 and 11. It's really that simple. And obviously, I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to. These are clearly my opinion. That's why it's Insane Ian's Top 12 and not the world's Top 12 or something. This is how I feel. This is my list. If you disagree, and considering this is the internet, you probably do, and you'll probably tell me in the comments, that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. This one just happens to be mine. That said, let's get started with our very first list. It is the top 12 live-action video game movies. Now look, I know video game movies aren't great. A lot of them suck. It's true. And sure, you're not gonna see any movies by Uwe Boll on this list. This is the top 12 video game movies. Instead of talking about the things they do wrong, let's talk about the things they do right. And there's a bunch of them out there. I actually really like a lot of video game movies. In fact, if they make a movie of a video game, guaranteed, I pretty much have it. This is also a great time to do this, considering we've got talk of a brand new Mortal Kombat movie coming out next year, and the trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog just dropped. Now, I want to stress that these are live-action video game movies. Yes, I know that there are animated video game movies, but animation, you can do anything. There's no restrictions on budget or anything like that, so animation's a little easier to adapt something that's already animated as it is in game form. Live action's a little more difficult, so that's why this is strictly just a live action list. This is just my picks for the top 12 video game movies. Here we go.
Number 12, Dead Rising Watchtower. The Dead Rising series of games is everything you want from a B-grade horror movie about zombies, and fittingly, this made-for-TV movie set after the events of the first two games follows that theme. From the goofy plot to the B-movie effects, it rides that line between schlock and actually entertaining that the Dead Rising games already fit so neatly into. It has the right mix of humor from the games too, especially in the scenes starring game protagonist Frank West, played to perfection by Rob Riggle. While the sequel, titled Dead Rising Endgame, before Marvel made that word practically synonymous with their stuff, takes itself a bit too seriously, and the connections to the games are a bit looser, this flick perfectly encapsulates the major themes of the game series. Make weapons, kill zombies, survive with or against other humans, and B-movie plots are just fun. It's not as well known as many movies on this list, but I definitely recommend seeking it out. Number 11, Doom. Now, this may be where I start to lose some people, and honestly, I get it. Doom isn't a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely a fun one, with plenty of nods to the game series it takes its name from. And while there's plenty to complain about with this flick, there's also plenty to enjoy. It may be too dark, have a tenuous relationship to the games with its mutated humans rather than demons from hell, and there's no Doomslayer. However, it does at least have a decent protagonist in Karl Urban, a truly awesome first-person shooter sequence, and The Rock chewing the scenery in every appearance. It may not be great, but it's a damn sight better than the newest movie, Doom Annihilation, that released earlier this year direct-to-home video. While the movie at least turned the lights on and had a few more references to the games, it clearly had a lower budget, and one of the biggest cuts was the fun. The original Doom movie has that in spades. Number 10, Street Fighter. If I didn't lose you with that last entry, I'm definitely not winning you over here. But to be perfectly honest, the original live-action Street Fighter movie is a great time. A lot of people rightfully point out that yes, there are no actual street fights in the movie. But what we do have is an absolute schlockbuster of a flick. What that means is, sure, there's action, but there's also an insane amount of camp, too. And it's purposeful camp. You can't tell me that this movie isn't bad on purpose. Between the endlessly quotable lines of Raul Julia as Bison, to Zangief's hilarious gags in just about every scene, this movie is fantastically self-aware in its ridiculousness. It 100% knows it's a movie based on a video game, and as one of the first, it swings for the fences of Goofy and absolutely nails it. While that may not make it a good movie for most people, it certainly makes it a fairly enjoyable one for me. Granted, the animated Street Fighter II movie is heads and shoulders above this one, but this is my list of the live action flicks, so for that reason, it's not on here. But for all its coke-fueled stomach virus gotta cram all the characters into the flick because Capcom said so glory, it's a damn good ride. Number 9. Need for Speed. Who would have thought that a movie based on a series of racing games that, for the most part, have no real plot beyond racing, would actually make an enjoyable time? Well, certainly not me, that's for sure. But the Need for Speed movie is actually pretty decent. Taking a page from the Fast and the Furious movies, by way of a racer having a crew, and inserting a certain amount of a criminal element into the plotline isn't exactly what I was waiting to see here, but I was pleasantly surprised with the outcome, which was a fairly engaging revenge flick centered around what else but car racing. And here, all the driving and races, and crashes, are done practically, with a minimum of CG effects, which is pretty sweet to watch. The plot is pretty by the numbers, but for a car movie, all you care about are the races anyway, so it's a solid flick for that alone. And it even references specific races from the early games in the series, too. Number 8. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Say what you will about casting whitey white boy Jake Gyllenhaal as the titular Persian prince, the film as a whole is definitely entertaining. Based on Ubisoft's first reboot of the series, the movie loosely follows the Sands of Time storyline and has some pretty great set pieces. While there isn't as much wall running as I would have liked, there's still plenty of action, suspense, and drama in the flick, with bits of humor mixed in well into the rest of it. It's certainly ground that other Disney flicks have tread better, most notably the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but while it may be a mess in some spots, it's at least a fun mess. Number 7. Resident Evil. Much like Dead Rising, the first Resident Evil movie could very well work as a sequel to the games. Well, the first one anyway. Initially set at the titular mansion, there are nods that hero Alice was working behind the scenes at Umbrella, while Alpha and Bravo teams were investigating all the weird goings-ons there. And knowing the lore of the games helped a bit, as the villainous AI of the Red Queen was said to be modeled after the daughter of one of the scientists who worked on the virus, which made me think she might have been Sherry Birkin. Granted, the sequel diminished all those grand theories, and all subsequent sequels diminished things set up in each previous movie, but that's entirely another matter. But the first Resident Evil flick certainly serves up a decent alternative storyline to what goes on in the games. The film franchise as a whole, however, is probably best left alone despite being the most profitable game-to-film series so far. But that first initial entry was a great mix of action and horror that fans of the games surely could sink their teeth into. Just don't go in expecting too much connection to the games beyond Umbrella and zombies. Number 6. Assassin's Creed. I'm fully aware that I'm in the minority of folks who enjoy the Assassin's Creed movie. I'm a huge fan of the games, and I know that both the games and this movie are very lore-heavy. That said, the film slots nicely into the mythology of the games, and you'll find references to plenty of the events of the film in the games, and vice versa. While I don't totally love the redesign of the Animus, it certainly makes sense visually rather than just some dude lying on a table. And yes, I would have preferred to have seen more of Fassbender's character in the past than was shown, but honestly, I really dig the lore of the modern day stuff too. Another unpopular position here, but I actually enjoy all the Desmond stuff from the games as much as the synchronizations with the past ancestors. So maybe this movie was made just for me and me alone. If that's the case, thanks! But I do have some notes for a sequel so that other fans might have something to enjoy too. Number 5. Tomb Raider. After two fairly decently received, yet admittedly goofy movies in the early 2000s, the film franchise of Tomb Raider did exactly what the game franchise did: reboot itself. Starring a younger, more inexperienced Lara, The games and newest film both set out to show how this girl became the jet-setting explorer and no-nonsense badass we all know Ms. Croft to be. And the film itself followed the rebooted series' first game extremely closely. Admittedly, it falls apart a bit in the third act by explaining away the supernatural bits as something a bit less interesting, but for an adaptation of the reboot, it's a really solid effort. Mixing in a bit of story that players only discover once playing the second game in the new series was a good way to tease a sequel, and I certainly hope we get one, as Alicia Vikander is as worthy an action hero as Angelina Jolie was before her. Just don't chicken out on all the mystic coolness next time, guys. Number 4. Rampage. On paper, Rampage shouldn't work at all. It doesn't really follow the games at all, save for starting in Chicago and featuring giant gorilla, wolf, and lizard creatures that smash everything in their wake. But honestly, what more do you need? The premise is already goofy AF, so why not embrace it and lean into it? That's exactly what the movie of Rampage does, and by accepting its own ridiculous premise, it accomplishes something no other video game movie had done up to its release. The highest rating for a video game movie on Rotten Tomatoes. Granted, it holds strong at 51%, and there's another video game movie released recently that has beaten it. But that's still higher than The Rock's other video game movie, which, yes, is Doom. Everyone in the movie is having a blast, and it shows on screen. It's hard not to share in that while watching it. Number 3. Mortal Kombat! The OG of video game movies, Mortal Kombat has long stood atop lists of how to do video game adaptations right, where previous attempts at bringing the worlds of Super Mario Bros., Double Dragon, and even previous list entry Street Fighter all eschewed faithfully adapting the game's own weird storylines, Mortal Kombat embraced that weird, and gave us the characters and story we all fell in love with at the arcades. Smartly, only adapting the first game and its smaller roster of 7 characters, unlike Capcom's insistence to cram every character from 13 versions of Street Fighter 2 into their movie, and giving extra special care to making the fight scenes stand out, another failing of the Street Fighter movie, MK did the seemingly impossible, and the movie was a hit at the box office, raking in $122 million on a budget of only $20 million. Sadly, everything they did right for this movie they screwed up for the sequel, but that's apparently par for the course in the video game adaptation world. And though some may decry the fact that the flick is only PG-13, so the fatalities lose a bit of their punch, it's still one of the most faithful adaptations of a game despite that fact. Also, the new movie they're currently working on looks to remedy that. We'll find out in 2020 if that's true. Number 2. Silent Hill. Personally, for me, for a long time, Silent Hill was the gold standard of video game movies. It adapted what it needed to from the games, kept the iconography and feel of the series, and blazed its own path for the rest. Basically an adaptation of the first game, albeit with a few liberties taken here and there, Silent Hill holds up as one of the best video game adaptations of all time. Just as brain-scramblingly horrifying as the game itself, Silent Hill changed just enough to be its own thing away from the games, while still clearly showing love to the source material as far as themes and inspirations. Granted, yes, Pyramid Head and the nurses don't belong in this particular story, but as iconic as they are, they couldn't not be here either. As with the rest of these entries, however, the less said about the lackluster sequel, the better. And number 1, Pokémon Detective Pikachu. Finally, we get to what I feel is the best video game adaptation, and it was released this year. Pokémon Detective Pikachu does everything right, and it does it with style. The effects on the Pokémon are top-notch, and the mixing of live action and CGI is some of the best in film today. Pikachu is so damn cute! And yes, the story may be a bit on the predictable side, but come on. It's a kid's movie. It gave me everything I wanted out of a live-action Pokemon movie and more, and I'm not even a Pokemon fan. I've never even played the games, but I know enough about the series and this title itself, via pop culture osmosis, to know this is how you adapt a video game to film. And before you complain that this entry broke my no animated movie rule, tell me, where would they have gotten real live Pokemon to film for this? I'm hoping this flick continues the trend of mixing live action and CGI video game characters well, and it looks like we won't have long to wait, as Sonic the Hedgehog comes out early 2020. After that, the rest of the Super Smash Bros. Cinematic universe will finally begin to take shape! And that's my list. Let me know what you think of it in the comments, and if you could please give this video a like if you liked it. That certainly helps me out. I make new videos every single week, and you can get them early on Patreon. Thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate you all. We'll see you next time. Goodbye!